I'm now 75% of the way through with this book. Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, What Colorful Worlds. I'm Andre, and one of my goals as a colorist is to finish this book, Worlds Within Worlds. My goal initially was to get this done by the end of 2025. However, I didn't manage to stay on task with that, so I don't think I'll be able to finish it by the end of the year. But I did manage to finish 3/4 of the book so far, and I wanted to show you those pages. I'm not going to show you all of the pages I've done in the book so far because that will be too long. You may also look at this video here, which shows the first 50% of the book that I have completed. Instead, this video is going to go over the next set of pages I finished. So between 50% and 75%, they've been around 20 pages there and that I've colored. I'm very excited to show this to you. And at the end of the video, I'm going to have a silent flip through of all the pages I've done in the books so far. So stay tuned for that. All right, let's turn the camera over and get started. All right, so my last 25% of the book that I colored, I did it from February until now September, so that took me around 8 months. And so the first page that I did after I hit the 50% mark was this one over here, and I called this one the Book City because this is a city that's coming out of what used to be a book. And so for this one here, I used oil pastels in the background, and that's what creates this gorgeous galaxy sky really, really quickly and really easily. Just because you can blend the colors in with each other, it really helps create even smooth blends, and you can layer them, and they just have some absolute vibrant colors which go right into the tooth of the paper. So I love working with oil pastels. And I had just received them, so I was going a bit crazy with oil pastels here too. And so I decided to kind of make it a silhouette that's very stark by taking the city and completely blacking it out. And so I think this is where I made some mistakes, was figuring out which black medium to use. So I first did it with a Tombow marker, which is like a water-based marker. But unfortunately, Tombow markers streak a tiny bit. And because it's starting to look a bit streaky down here, and I didn't want to do too many layers because then like you can't layer water-based markers on top of each other to make them look even. That doesn't work. You use a different medium on top of that. So you have a choice of using coloring pencils. You can use pan pastels or chalk pastels. You can use paint. And so I chose to use chalk pastels at one point and paint as well, because I have a lot of area here and a lot of small details here. And I think that's where my mistake was because like if you use different mediums and you don't use it evenly and consistently, they look different. So for example, the matte here is very different from the black here. The black here is very different from the black here. And so that's something to keep in mind. But I'm still happy with the overall effect. And I had taken the book and I turned it into a mountain because in the moment I thought that looked a bit better. And it made a bit more sense that you have this alien city on top of this mountain that it's growing out of. So I converted the book to that. And I used my white paint pen to kind of bring back some of the lights in the city to give them a bit more detail. Otherwise, it would be just a bit less detailed. So February, I only did 3 pages. And so this is the other page that I did. So 1, 2, and 3. And also using my oil pastels because I was just so in love with the oil pastels as a concept. So the colors here are inspired by some different ones that I saw on Pinterest and online. I think quite a few people go this route with the colors. But I wanted this bird to look like this with the white head and then the black here and the black here and here because it's modeled off of a real crane. I forget the name of the real crane at the moment. I didn't look it up just now. Sorry for that, but it's a real crane that you can find reference photos for online. And so that kind of helped determine some of my colors as well. And so I liked just this idea of having this contrast between my ochre sky going from my whites to my yellows to like browny oranges with my very, very pinkish and peachish clouds, and then you have your pop of really bright red there and there. And so I think color-wise, this page works so well together. I was a bit nervous about coming into some of the details here because if you add other colors, it can detract from the color scheme. So I just kept it as light as possible. I made all of the greenery, like the shrubs and some of the trees, pink, and then only these evergreen tall trees a very, very, very light green, and then just the lightest shade of brown that I could find for for some of the other elements, just so that that doesn't distract you from the rest of the piece altogether. And I'm also really happy that I created a sun effect here by using my white oil pastel, and then just really making sure I preserve that as it goes out. And I think that just worked really well together as a concept. All right, so next up is March. All right, so next up is March, and in March I completed this page here, and the reason I picked this one is because Jordy Colors over on Instagram has her Color the Fairy Tales hashtag, and the hashtag for the month of March was Snow White, so I wanted the apples represented. Overall, I think that the colors of this page are really, really cool. I like that I kind of went solid with it as much as possible, trying to make it look more like, I guess, pop art in a sense, with some of the styles that I have there, and the color choices that I have there. And the way I colored it was using a base of my Ohuhu water-based markers, because if you just use markers, it just goes so much quickly, for those of you who know how to use markers. And also, markers can create a really nice solid base on top of which you can use other materials. So for the markers here, it's slightly streaky. You can see like the dark detailing is a bit streaky on top of the light detailing. You can see all the pen strokes, but I didn't mind that as much. And even here at the pens, you can see a tiny bit where I used some of the dark detailing. I just used it at the edges where it would have an overlap, and then I kind of like outlined some of the veins. And for the wood, same here. So like, and you can see the two different color browns that I used, and I used a tiny bit of stippling as well to make it look a tiny bit more textured. So those I don't mind. What I do mind is the sky and the fact that it's still a tiny bit streaky. So water-based markers, as you know, will be streaky, and like I mentioned in the first page that I showed you. And so on top of it, I was trying to use a coloring pencil to even it out. However, I chose electric blue. So from the Prismacolor set, electric blue is a really, really beautiful color. However, the binding of it is terrible. The color doesn't play nice with other colors. It is doesn't blend easily. It doesn't burnish, and the colors granulate. So the colors look like they separate into grains, as opposed to like giving you a nice solid sheet of color after too many layers. So it just created a sense of graininess, which I really, really didn't like. And then I think I tried using the marker on top of the pencil, and that's why I have some of these darker streak dots here and there. So, and then I quickly stopped that, and then, I don't know, it just took a minute to try to figure out how to fix that. But I didn't want to spend too much time on it either, because I wasn't as invested. And so this page, I think, has a lot of potential for just being very juicy and pop arty. Like, I really need to pop some of these highlights a bit more. They faded into the red, but that, yeah, I think my execution could have been a bit better for the vision I had of the page. However, I still think it's a really pretty page with the colors that I had. All right, so the next page, and I only colored 2 pages in March, is this one over here, and that's the title page, and I modeled it after the cover. And in part, I did it because the second hashtag that I follow is from Finding Joy in Color, and Jamie had picked monkey for the month, and so here's your monkey. And so I wanted to just model it off of the cover exactly. So I used watercolor paints for this one actually, and I left that one uncolored the same way it's left uncolored here. And I tried to make the background black, but I tried to make it black just fading in a tiny bit, so going black to gray. And to give it a bit more interest, and I even tried to add in some of those colored dots around. You can see he has some colored dots around as well, so not just white, but a couple like a red and a blue dot here and there, so I was mimicking that too. So I think it's an interesting concept. I'm not the biggest fan of the shading that I did, and that's because I just very, very lightly went over it with coloring pencils to just add in some extra shadow areas, but Kerby's line work is so small and minute, I didn't want to get too stuck on all of those. So I just left it in general how it was, but I'm really happy with the choice. I really like that I decided to use this cover to inspire me to do this, and it was just a really fun and also an easy one to do. Just watercolors go really quickly on a page as well. All right, so this brings me now to April. And in April, I had bought myself my first full set of Albert Dürer pencils because my birthday was at the end of March. And that was my birthday present to myself. So this is the page that I did. when I started using them, and you can see in this video here where I unbox my Albert Durers, some of the work that I do here. So for this page here, I'm really happy with the colors that I chose overall. I think that it's just soft, it's pretty, and the juxtaposition again between the cherry blossom red, I'm sorry, the cherry blossom pink and this like roof red is a color combo that I actually really appreciate, I think, especially if you mute everything out towards the pastel range. So like I have my pastel sky coming with a gradient down, and I have my green shoes. I know that some people do two different colored shoes, but I liked the parallelism of having it really be the same, so I didn't do that. And so in terms of using my pencils, it was a really nice discovery of how to use them, how light you can go, how dark you can go, and I supplemented it with quite a bit of my Tule Art paint pen. So for example, I used the browns to cover the line work of the tree, the pinks to kind of like add in some, like cover some of the line work of those, the blossoms, or leaves, whatever those are, in the tree itself. And over here, right, that's outlined as well with the paint pen. So it's just a good mix of both. With the ground, I think the ground here I actually did with Prismacolor pencils. And I think here this is also Prismacolor pencils. So I got a bit chickened out to use only the Albert Dürer on the page, so I switched to what I knew, which was Prismacolor pencils for some of these other smaller elements, like that roof is all Prisma. But the sky is all Albert Dürer, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. And if I were to make any other changes, now that I know how to color grass better, I would actually maybe draw in some grass or do something a bit more interesting here. Or instead of having this bottom thing be grass, have that be gray and concrete, and just kind of embrace the gray. That's, I think, a difference I would have made. But other than those small things, which are actually pretty minor, I love the color of the tree. I love discovering the new mediums. And I think that altogether, like, it works really well as a double page spread. So April, I got quite a few pages done. I think I did 7 pages in total. So after these two were done, I flipped over to the back and I did the answers page here. And so this one, I based it using my Ecoline brush pens. So browns for everything there, grays for those ones there. And there's something so nice about just like basting something straight up with those brush pens that really help block in the colors, and then it makes your coloring go so much more quickly because in your mind you know what goes where, and the color kind of kills the tooth of the paper, not in the sense that it gets rid of the texture, but it stains the tooth of the paper so you don't have that white peeking through. And so it means that all of the light parts here are just this this paint pen, this brush pen, and then all the darks are where I colored in with Prismas. So this is just Prismas in this, and here is chalk pastel. I did 3 different shades of chalk pastel, graded it with my little knife, X-Acto knife, into a powder, and then swished it in with my finger as well. And because there's so many different elements here, I find that if you have pages with tons of elements, the more strict you go with following a color palette, the better it looks, because then it's not too chaotic. So everything became gray. It's a gray squirrel, it's a gray bunny, it's a gray fox, it's a gray or wolf, it's a gray owl, and then all the buildings had red roofs and brown bodies. Even my slugs became brown. And then yeah, and then that just consistency, I think, A, makes it much easier to color, and B, it just adds to that sense of cohesion that I really like. And so when I did this one, I was like, you know what, why don't I actually have those same colors get pulled into these two? And then that way there's a bit of parallelism between the beginning and the end of the book. So then I went ahead and I did these two, following that exact same method. So again, basing with my brush marker, using my chalk pastels for that, using my Prismas to shade in everything else. And it went really, really well. The only mistake I made was this fox over here. I forgot to make that one gray, so he became a bit of a brown fox and hid away into the background. So he blended in, I suppose. But yeah, overall, it's simple, but it's very, very effective page that I did. And yeah, and I put in my little title over there. So the last two that I did for the month after this is this terrarium page here. And so this is one that I rushed a tiny bit because I was starting to get a bit sick of coloring in Kerby's work at this point, and I wanted to get this done before the end of the month. I still think it's really beautiful. I got the background idea from my friend Renata in the coloring community, who also had done a brick background for her terrarium page. And so what I used here were, I think just some inks with my brick stencil, and then I just used marker to make a few of these other ones a bit darker. I then whited out all of the line work for my glass little terrarium holders, and I was trying to add in just a tiny bit of white reflections as well to make it look like it was reflective and also see-through. And I'm not sure how effective that is, because, for instance, like you might have some like image warping if you're on the inside of the ball, but it didn't warp anything. So I'm not sure about that. I think overall I'm really happy with the background. I'm mostly happy with the way in which I made this see-through. I'm not the most happy with the colors that I chose, and that's in part because to make this go faster, instead of using pencils for all of these tiny, tiny plant details, I just used some water-based markers. But that also meant that I didn't really plan ahead of time to test them out and see if the colors worked well together. So for example, like I don't really think this matches everything else. And it's something I could have done with a bit more intentionality, I think. And then I did like pencil work on top for some of these windmills, but then it just looks a tiny bit muddy because Prismacolors, if you rush them a bit, can look a bit muddy. So not my favorite execution, but I think it is a really cool idea for this page to just give it like a background that works, and work a tiny bit on the glass effects that I did here. Yeah, so it worked out in the end. Maybe I should have added like some light gray towards the bottom to make it look like it's dirty at times or something. I don't know. What do you think? What could have happened to make this look a bit more realistic? Not sure. Anyway, so that brings me to the end of April, and next up I have May. And in May, I decided to go back to the Belong To pages, these ones here, because there are some mermaids in here. There's a tiny mermaid over there, for instance, and it's all underwater, so it does fit in with the theme of mermaid fairly well. And so I really, really love this one. It took me a long time to do, however. It's definitely worth the time that it took because I think in its execution, it is just a really, really gorgeous page. And so what I did to start is I used some white gesso to gesso out the words in the background, and then I sanded it down slightly with a low-tack sandpaper in order to kind of smooth it out again. And so that created a nice white surface for me to be able to get rid of those words and instead turn it into water. But part of the reason this took me forever is because feeling a bit sick of my Prismacolors at this point, I switched over to using my 36 set of polychromos for basically everything else. I did have a few Prismas that I threw in with any missing colors here and there, but other than that, I would say like 90% of the pencils used here were my polychromos, including on the water. And so I think color-wise, I did a good job picking the different color combos, having this kind of like pinkish combo, mixed with a bit of like an orangey yellow combo, the greens, some of the gray blue combos I think work really well, in contrast to the background. But another reason pages like this take a while is because of having to try to decide what color goes where to make it seem balanced. So for instance, like it took me a long time to decide to make all of these green here instead of making that one thing a bit orange. And you want to make sure that if the greens can be back to back, the other colors are not. So you'll never have like all of the bright reds right next to each other. They'll be interspersed a bit more. And then deciding for the big creatures, what color to make them. So for instance, like deciding to make this blue to kind of match the rest of those, and then making these my magenta combos to match that, I think also was a lot of time just mulling over the decisions, I guess. And then what do you do with all the buildings? Because there's a bunch of buildings thrown in too. And so for those ones, just going standard red brick, or like red roof, white, yellowy brick versus blue roof here and here. Is sort of where I went with them. Although in retrospect, you know, that's actually probably my favorite, just making it all slightly golden, like those two. Maybe if I just did those, it would look better. I don't know. But one thing with the background as well is that you can kind of see where the gesso ends and begins, because the colors are a lot darker, and it's the same pencil, but there's a bit of a lightness here for where the gesso ended as a circle if you look at it closely. But you know, it's a small thing, but something to keep in mind for next time. If you are going to gesso out this page, it might be worth, if you want like the textures to be perfect, to first use masking fluid on the elements, gesso all the way across to get into the nooks and crannies, and then remove the masking fluid. But if you don't mind like some of the textures, then that's fine. Gesso also, by the way, the scratches made by the paintbrush is hard to color into because it's too thin of a line for the pencil to get in, and so that's also why you'll have some of these like white scratches on it that you might not otherwise. And finally, I think I just used like a ruler and some white paint pens to make some of the water sloshes go through. But this took me, I think, maybe 2 weeks to do, and by the end of it, I was done with Kerby. And considering the previous month I had done 7 pages, this month's doing 2 pages, I think just made me a bit tired. So I just left it at that. I didn't do the rest of the water themed pages, and instead I waited until June. And in June, I did manage to complete a double page spread. So that's this one over here. This one went really quickly, and I'm also very happy with it. I love the contrast between how bright and vibrant the sunset is and how that automatically makes the water go darker. And I was also trying to get some light by having like the tops of the trees be yellow where the sunlight would come through, but then be dark where the shadow would be from the mountain, to kind of capture that a tiny bit as well. And so the page initially began with me using watercolor inks for the water, and it ended up being, I don't know if it was the wrong color ink that I chose, I just have a few, but it ended up being way darker than I was expecting. And so then I was trying to equalize it by using pencils on top. And so, and then of course, like I use my sepia brown ink for the body, so that there's that's one way to show something look underwater, is use the color of it on top of the water and then cover it with blue, and then that's how it looks like it's the same creature but underwater. But yeah, so the water became much darker than I was originally expecting it to be. And so I decided to make the sky a bright orange, when initially I was going to have it be just like a soft pastel sunrise. And so I'm glad I went with that decision because it adds more balance to the page as a whole. It was actually really quick to do as well. The entire sky took maybe half an hour, believe it or not, but that's the power of using oil pastels, is that like it's an instant vibrant color, and a large large surface area you can cover with them really quickly. So yeah, so oil pastels there, watercolor inks here. Here I think I based with my fine liners, and then sorry, it's called my Ecoline brush tip markers, the brown one, and then I went over that with colored pencil. And then this is just my inks again. And yeah, it does have some significant bleed through though. Like over here you can see a tiny bit of the green pop through there, and some of the green pop through here and here, so it does make the page a bit messy. Here you can see the blue, the green, the blue again. So this, it's not that hard to cover up. So I'll be able to cover that up at some point too. Oh, these were supposed to be my water pages, and then this was supposed to be a Space Timber page, but never got around to them. But yeah, so this is the double page that I did towards like the end of June, but I kind of needed a break after this, and so I again took time away from Kerby. But July came around and ended up not coloring at all in July because I was just, again, a bit too tired from Kerby, from pushing too hard in April. And so I just took a big break from him for a while because I didn't want to force myself to color him. I wanted to feel inspired to color him, and so I took that time off. And then when it came to coming back into Kerby, the page that did it for me in August is this flower page here. And so I decided I wanted to not use any pencils at all, because I think part of my tiredness with Kerby was having like if you use pencils, they take so much longer than if you use other media. So I started to just kind of let loose and experiment and go with the flow. And so I started with the background by taking a Thule art paint pen and just covering it with the green. And then I used my circle stencil and then used a mix of like a white pencil, some Albert Dürer green pencils, and I was just trying to make little circles everywhere. And then I took some distressed inks and I added those just to the corners to make it kind of like dirty out. And then finally some paint pen detailing to add little glimmers of stars. So I was really happy with that overall. I thought it looked really cool, really textured, really interesting. And then for the flower, I just used my Ohuhu water-based markers, just in flicking motions, and I did 2 layers to kind of build up the color a tiny bit. This is going to fade after a while and be like very pale, but I think it'll still look fine. And then for this, I did it based with yellow and then just covered it in my gold paint pen and my gold pencil dual hybrid brush pen. This one is what I'm talking about. And so I just got that gold gel pen detailing on there. And then finally for these butterflies / moths, I did, of course, the initial layer with my water-based marker, and then on top of it went to stickles. So then you have like a really nice shiny gold, I think it's the diamond stickles, to just add in the glimmer and gleam. Yeah, so just using no pencils here pretty much made it a fast page to do, and one that with some of the different experimentations of different media made me feel a bit more creative with Kerby's work as well, so I didn't have to feel so stuck with it. And I think that's, I guess, advice I would have for you. If you ever feel sick of an artist or stuck, try to change up how you color and also allow yourself to experiment, even if it might turn out bad, because like, you know, the threat of maybe ruining the page by messing with the background ended up just paying off because I just did what I felt like doing in the moment, and it looked really good. Also, I wasn't really following a theme here. So, you know, in like May, I had the mermaid, and then so just being able to like not have it connected to a page I must do because it fits a theme for the month also, I think, freed me a tiny bit too. And so the second page, because I only did 2 pages here, like still not pushing myself, is this crown here. And so kind of with the same vein, I wanted to do something that I knew I could do quickly so that I can keep interest in Kerby's work. And I had done this one earlier, so I wanted to match this one here by having it be kind of like the red golds versus my blue silvers. And so I used first my like off-brand ink pads for the background. I have a really almost dead black and then a more vibrant black and I think 2 different reds. And so I just kind of went over that, leaving it a bit smoky towards the edges and nice and textured. And then I splattered it with gold watercolor paint. And then this is just Prismacolor pencils. I'm using a gold combo. And so yeah, so then all of that took the longest because pencil work takes the longest. But I try to pace myself so I can get that done in short spurts, so that it wouldn't overwhelm me. It wouldn't be something that like I would work on, get bored, leave, and then take me forever to finish. Like I gave myself like time blocks to get sections done. And then yeah, and so then that's just, I think, more of the ink pad, white acrylic detailing on top, a bit of pencil there, a bit of pencil for the red, and then just the gold paint pen detailing coming down. I also left things white, so the border of this I left uncolored, and this I also left uncolored because I'm trying to leave more natural white in the pages. It's hard to do because I always want to cover everything, but it does add, I think, a bit more balance and detail that I would otherwise try to bring back in with the paint pen. And finally, I ended with some, I think it's still the Stickles family, but the that glossy one, I forget what it's called. So I just added that on top of these big jewels and here too to make them look a bit more shiny and jewel-like. So yeah, so really happy with these 2 pages, more experimental, with some good payoff, and it just reintroduced me to Kerby so that I wouldn't feel so overwhelmed with it. And so now, final stretch is Space Timber, and I went hardcore with Space Timber. I think I was ready to come back into Kerby. And so this is what kind of got me over the hump into the 75% mark as well. So to begin, I started with this double page asteroid spread towards the beginning here. And so what I did was I used that off-brand distressed ink in the background, which is a nice way of just having a quick first layer coverage of a coloring page. And so once that was kind of in details, I think my initial plan was to have this be I think a bit more rainbow colored, but I decided after looking at it, I wanted it to be all cool tones instead. And so what really helped this page come together were the Moonlight Jelly Roll gel pens. That is the only reason this page works, because they just add that neon vibrancy that you wouldn't get otherwise. And so, yeah, I just decided to, similar strategy to this, stick with a few color combos and just make sure they're interspersed. So yeah, so this took me the longest time just in terms of deciding color placement. But I'd had like my blue combo, my browny, yellowy, green combo, and my pinky reddy combo. And then I would just like modify those slightly as they went around. So, what I did was also used a white pencil to kind of like add some of the shimmers around the different elements and things, and that helped. And it was Prismacolor plus those jelly rolls to pull it all together. So yeah, really happy with this double page spread. Also for the stars, instead of having the stars be white, I had the stars silver, so I had white dots and then the star shapes were silver. And so it also adds just like another element of glow to the page, which I really appreciate. So yeah, so that's the first double page spread that I did. And then I went immediately into a second double page spread, which are these two here. And so this now brings me to my 75% mark exactly, and that leaves me with, I think, 22 pages left in the book. So for this one, I do have a video up here where I explain to you how I made the bubbles, and so it's like a mini tutorial / vlog of how I made this page. Step one is to take a paint pen and make a solid color in the background. So again, using my Tule Art paint pen, just made one solid color. That same paint pen I used on the inside of the bubbles too. And then I used Prismacolor pencils on top with a bit of a rainbow sheen to them. So my like blues, greens, yellows, pinks are the only combos that I used. And then a ton of white paint pen detailing and highlights. I liked having kind of like 4 squares kind of being reflected. Maybe there's like a window in the background, I don't know. But it fits my Space Timber theme because of this particular bubble here. But it goes fairly fast. Like once you have the technique down for the bubbles, it's just a bit repetitive. So the main difficulty is keeping my attention span going. And then for the inside bubbles here, I try to add in like mists. So I would just take my white acrylic paint pen and just smush it so it's all smushed to kind of give it a bit misty vibe so it's not fully transparent. And then yeah, really adding in some shinies and highlights on top to emphasize that too. So yeah, so those are the 25% of the book that I had completed for that quarter, and I now have only a quarter of the book left to do, which is super exciting. Even though I'm not going to make my original plan of finishing the book by December, I will be finishing this soon in the early months of 2026. Alright, so for the rest of this video, I'm going to put on some music and do a silent flip through of the whole book so that you can see all of the pages I've colored together. you so much for watching, and bye for now.